Okay. 6 o'clock. I'd like to start the meeting by standing and doing the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Patty, roll call, please.
Mrs. Chamberlain,
Here.
Mrs. Saylor,
here.
Mrs. Corey,
Here.
Mr. Dilks,
Here.
Colonel Hensky,
Here.
Dr. Jones,
Here.
Mr. Lepsis, Dr. McCoy,
Here.
and Mrs. Shoemaker.
Here.
Thank you.
Sorry, I got notice just a few minutes ago that Brian got called away from work. He wasn't going to be able to make it tonight. I forgot my glasses. I can't read anything. So we'll start with our public comment. This is our one and only public comment tonight. Please state your name and address. Each
You need to
speaker.
read the Sunshine Act.
Oh, I did skip it, didn't I? Sorry. Sunshine Act. In compliance with the Public Opens Meetings Act, this is to announce that adequate notice of this meeting was given in the following manner. On January 8th, 2020, notice of this meeting was transmitted to the Burlington County Times and Central Record, filed with Township Clerk and posted in the office of the Business Administrator Board Secretary. Additional notification was made on October 28th, 2020 in the Burlington County Times to inform the public that this meeting was rescheduled and will be held in virtual format. Notification was also posted on both the district website and the district app. I direct the Business Administrator Board Secretary to enter this statement into the minutes. Okay. Now the public comments. Please state your name and address. Each speaker will be allotted a maximum of 3 minutes. No one may speak more than once on the same topic. Please keep your comments respectful and non-defamatory. Keep in mind that it may not always be possible or appropriate for the board to directly answer questions during public comment periods. And at this time, you may speak on only agenda items.
Meg, it's all items,
It's all
isn't it?
objects. Yes.
Say that again?
It's not just agenda items.
Oh, it's on all, I'm sorry, on all items. Anybody? Any hands? Jason, Sean?
I don't see any.
Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to the Edtech Committee. Dr. Jones?
The board members should have gotten notification today. The Edtech Committee met on the 29th. We had a little over a 2-hour meeting. So thank you to Dan and Meg and Gail and Sean and Melissa and Patty for coming in for that one. We covered a whole host of objects and topics that has been shared with the board. So obviously, if any of you guys have questions, please let me know. A little bit of a heads up that we will be having a presentation at our November board meeting on map testing, but fair warning, that information is going to be a little bit different than normal because we cannot compare it to spring data because, as you guys are all aware, we did not have spring map testing. Did I miss anything, Sean?
No, that's a big thing. And going back to what Megan's saying there, that is a requirement by the state of New Jersey to present data. It's something that will also be assessed on our QSAC visit, which we are being QSAC this year. So that's one of the things that we have to do. That's what Megan was referencing in terms of the presentation. So Melissa and I have been talking and trying to figure out how we can still present something to you. There'll still be a data analysis, but like I said, it will be a very different thing since what's usually, when we talk about here's your data from the spring, let's see how the students moved on. It'll be fall to fall data. So just stay tuned with us. We have a presentation coming on that for coming up as well. And since I mentioned QSAC as well, one of the things we talked about is there is a board member that has to serve in the district's QSAC team. If you looked over the notes, Gail has so graciously said if nobody else wants the position, she will serve on the team. But obviously, I wanted to offer that to any other board member that's so desire to serve on our QSAC committee and take Gail's place if you'd like to.
So please speak up. Speak up. Anybody? Anybody?
Wait, Dan's not here, right?
Oh, yeah, okay.
I'm just trying to make this as painless as possible for the board members. We'll take
I
on.
will step up.
Oh, Vicky, thank you. So Vicky will be in touch then, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
Vicky.
Vic. Vicky's a good choice. She's got a lot of experience.
All right, thank you
Hey,
very
hey,
much.
Sean.
Yes.
Sean, I just have one request. Could you guys shoot out an email to the board when you add the stuff on the day of the meeting or something like that, just so we know to go and look at it ahead of time?
Did it not come out?
So there was a
No.
little bit of a miscommunication. Marlene originally put it into the regular board packet that hadn't been shared, and I followed up with her, said, wait, I don't see it. And I think perhaps that got added in after the revision. I did not get CC'd on a email to the board saying it had been uploaded, but I thought perhaps Mar did not include me because I was the one on the phone with her saying, wait, I don't see it. Just in
The
case.
only, yeah, I mean, the only notification I saw today was that the agenda had been updated.
Gotcha. So she
That's
probably didn't
correct.
put that
It's-
piece in there that the board packet itself had been updated. Not a problem, Kevin. I'll make sure we address.
Thank you.
Thank you for
And
letting me-
obviously, if any board member comes up with a question over the next couple, days and they want to answer it before the board meeting, please feel free to reach out to me or Sean directly. I'm sure Sean would be willing to answer them as well.
Absolutely.
But we wanted to give people a heads up, a chance, since it's something like 4 pages of notes to go through.
Yeah, for any board member who hasn't seen it yet, it is part of the packet for tonight, but it was not announced as they discussed. Please take a look at the notes from the meeting. There's a lot of stuff in there.
Yeah, I apologize for that one. I thought that was included in the update, and we'll make sure that's done in the future.
It's fine, Sean. It'll be easier for us because then we can have a better discussion. And I know, like last week with the policy ones, or last time, I don't think anything came out that got added either. So I want to make sure everybody's informed. That's all.
Not a problem.
So for Sean or Megan, then, are we going to discuss the EdTech meeting notes tonight, or are we holding them until the next board meeting?
We can discuss them if there's.
If there was something you had a question on, I wanted to discuss,
No, well, I'll give
Steve
the
does,
rest
but in
of
a
the
minute.
board opportunity to take a look, but there's a few topics in there I do think we need to discuss openly.
Steve.
All right, well, the first one about costs. Are you guys going off the premise on that total cost of having full-timers, full-time students, hybrid students, and virtual students, and having 3 different versions of what we can do? And that's what's driving up the cost on the notes?
So the idea behind that we were looking at, Steve, is if we went to a full day to then meet the needs of the hybrid students and then separate the needs from the virtual students.
So it'd be a full day hybrid plus virtual.
Correct. That was that was what we were looking into. I know I have talked to other districts, and because one of the things obviously you're seeing that would necessitate some additional cost there is you're hiring, as you mentioned, of the additional staff to meet the needs of the virtual learners. Some districts are looking at a couple of different things. For instance, I know I've talked to some districts and they're looking at the spacing that they have within their buildings to shift. And again, this comes down to not changing the 6-foot spacing, to doing some things, and they might have some different staff than we do of trying to keep classrooms 6 feet apart, but seeing if they can figure out a way to then go back to 5 days a week with the students that way. That would be tough for us with our staffing that we currently have. We are looking into, and we did start taking measurements to find out if the state does make changes, if they did something and allow us to have, let's call it 3-foot spacing. I know we started looking into that before the governor started making the additional, or the CDC, I should say, made some changes to the contact tracing model, which again, if you're not familiar with it now, is now 6 feet for 15 minutes. And it doesn't have to be consecutive minutes, but 15 total minutes would be considered a positive contact if somebody does have COVID. But we were looking into, and are still just to get numbers in case there are changes. So just for your own edification, for instance, a room right now that would fit like 12 students with 6-foot spacing, if you went to the idea of a 3-foot spacing, you're looking to could jump anywhere from 20 to 28 kids in a room. Again, most of our class sizes are not 28, but just we're trying to find out what the maximum that would do for that. But again, that would be right now, the recommendations are still to adhere to the 6-foot spacing based on the guidelines.
But okay, so I guess my question then is, if we went to 5 days a week or get all the kids who want to go to school in school and not do hybrid, couldn't we couple the virtual learning kids through, like you said, live streaming it from the classrooms, and wouldn't that just cut down on staff? So we did 2 for 1. Isn't that what Southampton's doing?
They have, my understanding, they have live streaming and additional teachers that are running fully virtual classrooms. When I'm talking to them, they had a number of sections in their grades that had 4 teachers per grade level. So they were able to combine the students, I believe what I was told, to have 3 students in 3 grade classes in school, and have the 4th person become a virtual person for those grades in a number of instances. So they had some additional staff to pull on that we didn't. That seems to be a common theme for a lot of the schools. They were able to pull some other things off that, again, we don't have. We have our staffing is set for just the exact number of students we have, and based on the way that our numbers broke down of students in person and not, we really couldn't split more than we have to have someone as a designated virtual learner more than we already have.
Okay, I guess from what I've heard, been told by the Southampton is the teacher that's teaching the class is also teaching the virtual kids as well. There's not additional staffing. So if the child who's virtual has a question, they basically raise their hand like Zoom, and they treat them just like they're a normal student in the class. And they put them up on their whiteboard, and all the kids can see it. So it's okay. I'm looking at the cost.
That is the model we
Steve,
have. Steve. I'm sorry, go on, Dan.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Steve, if I'm understanding your underlying question, the cost estimate that was provided from the meeting minutes assumes hiring that additional staff.
Right.
However, with what you're stating about live streaming and synchronous learning, that additional staff wouldn't be needed.
That was my understanding of how some of the other districts, and I think the high school is doing it that way as well.
I am tracking very much the same way.
The high school is somewhat of a very different educational model in the fact that the research has come back and said that that younger grades, it is not as effective to do that with. So we would be putting our students in the youngest grades at the greatest default.
Right, Megan, I agree with you, but I think right now, the model that we have right now is putting our kids at risk. So
I think it's it's the best or worst, least bad exam situation, given what we can afford.
Meg, since you've seen that research, is there a student level break point when it makes sense?
Sean, am I correct? Like, I think a bunch of them were talking like 6, 7, 8, maybe.
Yes.
Like
I
middle school.
At middle school on up, Dan.
Yeah.
That seems to have where the kids can therefore have, let's call it, they're more accustomed to longer periods of screen time.
Right.
Where I think, for instance, and I'll use the example of the farther end of the spectrum, to say to a kindergartner, you're going to sit in front of a screen for 6 hours a day, even for 4 hours a day, is a very difficult thing.
Yeah, I don't think anybody would suggest that would be an appropriate educational tool for a kindergartner, but with some of these models that can be live streamed, they can also be recorded and played back at the convenience of that student and their family.
There's actually a whole other issue that comes down to that's why they're live streaming and not recording. In most schools, as soon as you record, it becomes an issue of student records, and that's a whole other legal ball of wax. That's why the districts, for the most part, I've talked to, are not allowing no recording of the instruction. It's just that they're live streaming it only. It's a student records issue.
So if the students, just to clarify, Sean, so if the students are in the room, that is the case. In some cases, a teacher might tape themselves, like our teachers are currently, and that can be watched at the discretion of a family. But you're talking about with students in the room with FERPA and things of that nature. I know that's alphabet soup, that there are some legal issues that are arising as far as rights of students.
And that's why we can do our teachers recording the way we have right now, because they're not recording students, they're recording themselves.
But wouldn't that continue if we were live streaming?
No.
Why would the students necessarily be recorded?
That wouldn't, because if you're live streaming, that negates, like, especially if you went to a full day, then we would have no time for the actual recording of the videos.
Yeah, but so Sean, in the case of what we're doing tonight with this Zoom meeting,
yes,
presumably, and Jason, maybe you can comment on this. Let's say, Sean, you're the teacher, and everyone else in this Zoom call is playing the role of the student. Isn't there a way to provide the instruction to all of us attending and then package that as a recorded lesson whereby we only see you? We only hear you.
If there's anything, not with the platform that we're using, because we're using Google Meet, and there's not a way to just record this teacher and not record the other students that are a part of the call. or
So
potentially anybody who else who's
Okay.
on camera in the classroom.
So we also talked about a supplemental camera that will be put into the classroom, a webcam of sorts, which would manage some of the whiteboard activities,
Correct.
right? Couldn't that be positioned so that the stream from that only was captured and saved, and that could be made available after the fact? The Zoom, perhaps that's one and done.
You'd
but
still have the audio.
Webcam could record it and make that available.
Exactly what Megan just said. You'd
I
have
didn't
the
hear what you said.
She
You'd
said
have the audio, which means that any student who is speaking, whether it be in the classroom or one of those kids who was quote unquote up on the whiteboard who's virtual, those things would also be caught by those audio devices and have the potential of violating students' rights. And in particular, it becomes even more problematic if those students have an IEP.
Well,
What other
so
school?
how are other students doing it?
Yeah, this is
They're-
happening all
they're
around
live
us.
streaming only. They're not recording, to my knowledge.
And two, if that's the case, then when all the kids are in school, you're talking about their rights and
You're not recording
They're not
them.
recording.
you record them on the bus.
That's not a classroom setting. That's a security setting. There's a different circumstance there with security cameras on buses in the hallways compared to a classroom of instruction, which therefore that's what's part of the student records because it is instructional.
But other
If you-
districts are doing it. I don't understand why it's okay for them and not for us.
If you're aware of a district is recording it, I'd like to know. Most of them have told me they're only streaming, they're not recording. So
I'll look into that, Sean.
Okay.
Sean, have you heard of any other districts that are having these issues?
Better in terms of streaming?
Or having difficulties with recording and then
I
there
haven't,
be
I
issue?
don't know anybody that's recording. They've always mentioned every time conversation that's just the wording is being used is live streaming. No one's ever said it's and recording this for a future date. So again, I'm not saying it might not be, it might be happening somewhere. It's never been part of the conversations when I've been talking to other people.
Sean, at the Edtech meeting, you spent a lot of time talking about the live streaming and the recommendation that some districts that are doing it told you not to do unless you had a second device capability.
Yes, they did. Said that basically to do it correctly, the recommendation is you have 2 devices per teacher, 1 device to present, 1 device to run the Meet or Zoom, depending on which interface you are using to make sure you're minimizing your technical issues. Because they said there's a very good chance that's one of the biggest issues they're having is the tech glitches throughout, cutting off streaming and so on. And that also, like we talked about, like Dan had mentioned there about the second camera. So the second camera, instead of using your webcam that's built into your computer, the second camera, if we looked into that, would then enable that camera to capture the smart board without necessarily blocking the students' viewpoints. So that would be one of the things that's recommended there. And again, you'd want to make sure the reason why you also want the 2 devices is that way the teacher has an easier time to see the students that are watching at home to hopefully minimize their anguish when they're watching something and getting frustrated that the teacher doesn't actively see their hand being raised if they're assisting someone else in the classroom as well.
All right, well, I think we're going to move forward on any plan whatsoever. We're going to have to, I know you guys have done a lot of work on it and I appreciate it, but no particular model is going to fit each grade because middle school is going to be different than grammar school. Number of, we could probably put all the 8th graders into either classroom and virtual and teaching, get probably get the same amount out of it, well, most of them. And then obviously like with 4th graders and 3rd graders, things are going to be completely different. But, I'm looking, I don't know what the way forward is per se. And, things might change in a dime as far as the state goes. But I do know that I appreciate all the hard work the administration is trying to do in order to continue to enhance the educational experience. But it's also when are we going to make decisional points that we know what we're going to spend, like budget wise, how much money we have, because we're fast approaching what I consider, I think, I don't know if we all agree, but midpoint of the year, if we're going to make any changes, going into the next year, or are we going to try to keep our current model going into, 21? it's fast approaching, and I don't see us having enough data to make any good decisions.
And Steve, that's one of the reasons administration was kind enough to provide it to us, the numbers based off of a January 1 start. It's also why it was broken down within the board minutes, or sorry, the meeting minutes, into individual kind of chunks of technology versus staffing versus transportation, because I think it was very helpful for administration to kind of break that down to provide, I think, a little bit more clarity and detail than just a number.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, Meg, but it's unfortunately, maybe it's just my engineering brain. It's not enough details for me.
So
No,
Steve, I'm sorry, go on. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I
no,
apologize.
that's fine. Go ahead.
So one of the things I think to look into is, I think one of the stumbling blocks when you start talking about just the full day itself, again, is you end up throwing in the additional cost issues in terms of lunch, but also in terms of the health risks of lunch and the additional staffing and things like that that come into. And I think that's why some other districts are looking into figuring out, let's stick in the half day, but is there a way to bring more students in on those half days? And again, when you start factoring in, and when you do the half day extrapolation to a full day, don't forget an hour of that time, roughly, especially for the younger grades, is going to be divided between recess and lunch. Right. You're also part of that time is the extending the additional classes they have there. So like the other classes, meaning, related arts becomes longer and stuff like that. So you're not actually getting, when you look at the cost of moving to a full day from what we currently have, it almost makes more sense to figure out, is there a way to move to a more people in school for every half day, based on the other ramifications that come up with based on social distancing requirements, health needs, and the additional cost to make sure those are happening in a safe manner.
I got it, Sean, but you muddled up 3 different gray areas that put them all together into one little packet and said, here you go. And it's not like that. First and foremost, it's risk. Okay, if we're going to go to a full day, there's other districts that are, doing full day where they're offering lunch, they're doing all that. And we haven't seen a spike in a ballooning of COVID there in that area saying this is a bad model. So, so the risk part, I think that we got good mitigation in some of the school districts who have a full day. Cost, I get cost. Okay, and it comes with it because you got the additional staff, you have things. And then there's obviously, we have to deal with the teachers on this because I'm sure there's different opinions from the teaching staff as to what they're comfortable doing. Also, what their opinions on it, and that needs to be come into consideration. And you as administration have to take that into account. And we as the board, want to provide you the resources to do the job. So I get all that. So that's, like I said, 1s and 0 kind of dude. I don't think the risk, I don't right now, I don't think the risk is any different than a half day versus a full day. Because if it was ballooning somewhere like Southampton, who does a full day, would be, the flares would be going up and everybody be screaming, this is a really bad model because kids are taking off their masks. But a cost I get, and I can,
and Steve, what you're seeing in Southampton are families who opted to be full remote to start are asking to come back because they see that model works.
On the same boat, Dan, we've had plenty of families that ask to come back from the remote as well in our district too. So I think no matter what, you can find the same boat that families are looking at the comfort levels of what's happening in districts too.
Absolutely. I think the trend is people want to send their kids back in person. Maybe not for every family, maybe not for every kid.
Sure.
There's going to be underlying reasons why they want to keep them out. Completely understand that. And we have to teach those kids equally.
Absolutely.
But I think we also need to accommodate as much in-person teacher facing time as we can. And I think we need to continue to explore ways to do that. And whether it's lengthening the day or making accommodations to bring more kids in on a given day. I'm looking at the numbers that were reported by you for the estimates, and I'm also very appreciative of all of those. And if we can make it work from the technology side, it's not that much money. We'll figure out a way to make it happen. Because I think, the educational experience that's going to be put in front of the kids is going to be superior than what we're doing today.
Don't forget, though, one of the main things with the full day model that's happening at Southampton that is not something we can do right now is they are not having all the students eat in the classrooms. They're
Yeah,
eating.
they're bringing blankets in and sitting on the floor.
We can't do that. We don't have the time based on the way our schedule works. We have so many grades in OMS. We could do it in TES with K and 1. That's a different animal. But at OMS, because the way that our APR and our gym are being used by so many different grades throughout the day, our APR is being used as a second gym location. We have the gym room, gymnasium is 2 locations for phys ed to keep our cohort separately. So realistically, you can't meet 2 things at once. We can't have phys ed use the space and use the space for all the lunches for the number of people that have to do it. It would be. And that's why we had to put the model in there to have the lunches in the classroom, which becomes, like I said, an additional issue. So they have people that are eating in a larger area. So it's more spread out, it's more airflow. So going back to your point before, Steve, I think that's one of the things that probably helps them not having any spike. From the way that our schedule is set up with the number of students in the buildings, we would have to be eating in our classrooms. So that is a bit of a different circumstance to look into. And I don't know, we're talking again, 30 minutes of eating or whatever the case may be. That's a bit of a different animal. You're talking about unmasked time. So just sort of make sure that that's thrown out there. It is a bit of a different circumstance. That being said, we will continue to look at models. We'll have more conversations with our teachers as well. And I think the next step is probably to also reconvene the pandemic response team. If you recall, during the summer, that was the groups that we pulled together. We had one in particular, which was our main team, to try to discuss and gain input as to evaluate our current model and to discuss a path forward to the next steps. So I think that's probably our recommended group to pull together. That's part of the response and recovery plan to begin with. So that'd be my recommendation, would be for us to pull back that group in the next few weeks to get some input on them and some insight from the people that really helped us provide input over the summer to create the plan we are currently in.
Sean, with coming back to Southampton for a second, because I know Steve in particular has some connections there. How is their student body set up in the schools and their buildings? What classes are in what buildings?
That I am not sure exactly which class or what, but I know it's not the same spread that we have. It's not a 2 to 8 spread. And I do, like I said, that was one of the things I am aware of. That I don't think they have the same exact spread that we do. So I think they have more spacing. Like I said, that's just my understanding. If I'm incorrect on that one, then so be it. But that's what it's been explained to me so far.
Yeah, it seems like it's a tough pill to swallow to hear like something like phys ed is keeping us from managing the lunches, which is keeping us from having the kids in school for the day.
I said it's one of the things. It's one obstacle. It's not the only obstacle. Like I said, there's other things we'd have to look into.
We've got nothing but obstacles, Sean. I'm with you on that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And as we well know, as the governor has even said in the past week, that there's no option off the table when you're looking at the recent, to use his phrasing, surge in numbers throughout the state. So I know we're talking about bringing kids back, but for all we know, is if he's saying no options on the table, I got to question whether or not at some point in time we're going to see us go back in some way, shape, or form, even for a small period of time, to what we experienced in the spring.
Yeah, this is why I would be dead set against making any changes to staff.
I understand.
Because you make that commitment and then that rug gets pulled out from under you and you just sunk all that money for really no apparent reason. So that's why I'm pushing the way I am to do something with the technology side that allows us to address the issue.
Understandable entirely, Ben. I see your point there.
Anybody else? Okay.
Any other topics on the EdTech notes? I swear it wasn't the entire meeting was on that one topic.
Yeah, that was topic number 1. Now topic number 2.
Yes, sir.
Meg, it felt like it.
Yeah, it did.
I understand. I just want to make sure there was nothing else from anyone else. All right.
All right,
You're back, Meg.
let's move on to human resources. We have accept with regrets the resignation of Jason. Jason, we're sorry to see you go already.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It wasn't something that was planned.
These things never,
Everybody here has been wonderful to me. So it leaving with nothing but good feelings and good things to say about everyone.
glad to hear that. So we have human resources, A and B. Can I get a motion?
So moved, Vicky.
Thank you.
Second, Judy.
Kevin.
I'm going with Judy. Sorry, Kevin. Any questions or comments? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Corey,
Yes.
Mr. Dilks,
Yes.
Colonel Hensky,
Yes,
Dr. Jones,
Yes.
Dr. McCloy,
Yes.
Mrs. Shoemaker,
Yes.
Mrs. Saylor,
Yes.
Mrs. Chamberlain.
Yes.
Thank you.
Sean, do we have anything under the operations committee?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. Kevin, policy?
All right. I hope everyone enjoyed the reading over the weekend.
Kevin pulling out the big guns with all this stuff, man.
So we have a lot of policies to go through. I will kind of go through and let you know what I saw. Sean, obviously I'll be asking for your input too, because I think there's a couple of optional things and a couple of these that we need to decide on as a board.
Correct.
Starting off, the first one was 1620, which is administrative employment contracts. This one got revised due to an appellate court decision. It has to do with public notice and hearing when a board rescinds or terminates an administrative contract before it's due to expire. It was revised to reflect statutory changes, including abolishment of the superintendent's salary caps. I did not see any optional selections in this policy, so there's really nothing to decide on this for this one.
That is correct.
Okay. Next up is 2431, which is the policy and regulation for athletic competition, and the regulation was renamed to emergency procedures for sports and other athletic activity. This one was again revised to comply with statutory changes, and it's required for districts with any grades 6 through 12. So this requires the establishment and implementation of an emergency action plan for responding to serious or life-threatening sports-related injuries sustained while participating in sports and other athletic events. I also did not see anything optional in this policy.
The only options were to maintain what we already have in our policy. There weren't any changes to those sections, so that the
Nothing new.
Not correct.
Okay. Next one is 2451, which is adult high school. This doesn't apply to us. It's not currently in our books, so we can just kind of not do anything with that one. Next one's 2464, gifted and talented students. So this one's updated to better align with statute. We brought this, the prior version of this for first read at the 1019 meeting. So basically we're going to need to bring this back for first read again at the November meeting. And I did not see any additional or new optional language there.
That's correct.
Okay, and anybody jump in if you have a question as we're going. Next up is 5330.05, which is policy and regulation for the seizure action plan. This one was new. It's a new mandatory policy required by statute. It requires a seizure action plan be submitted to the school nurse for students with epilepsy or a seizure disorder. It also includes language to ensure that all staff are trained in the care of students with epilepsy and seizure disorder. So this one will probably have an additional requirement for training on the staff. And I did not see any optional language in this one.
Kevin, if you would clarify, is that revised or new? It's listed as revised on the sheet.
It is, I thought it was new.
Give me one
I
second.
think it's on the, it might be on the,
It is a new plan. The seizure action plan, but it should be listed as new.
is it just in the agenda, Dan, you mean like that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, must got it copied wrong into the agenda. It is new.
It is new.
Thank you.
Yep. Next is 6440, which is cooperative purchasing revised. It was revised to reflect administrative code changes. I didn't see any new additional language or optional language here either.
You are correct.
Okay. Next one is PNR 6470, which is electronic funds transfer and claimant certification. This is a new mandatory policy. It applies for boards of education that want to permit EFT transactions for the payment of claims. Do we do that?
Patty?
Patty?
Sorry, I was muted. We do not do any EFT transactions except for our agency for payroll. I hesitate, and our bond payment is, no, our bond payment is the check. So not that I know of, no.
Do we, for the payroll, does that count towards this, Sean or Patty? I don't. Or do we need to take a look and see if it does or not?
Yeah, let me check.
I think we should
Okay.
take one more look. I know it was a required policy, but I'd rather us be safe on that one.
Yeah, let me check and see.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, if we do anything, or if we have plans to do something with electronic fund transfer, then we do need to adopt it. Otherwise, the way I read it was that we would not need to adopt it.
Right.
Okay.
Kevin, my
And
one
there-
question, sorry
Yep.
about that. My one question with that is, and it was for Patty, is if we are not using it, is it something that is likely to be coming into our lives over the next couple of years? In which case, would it make sense to have it on there so we don't whoever's on the board at that time, not assume that it was already on and not put it in?
Unfortunately, I'm sorry, I did not read this one prior. So claimant certification is giving me a little pause because we have claimant certifications on our purchase orders when we ask our vendors to sign them so that we can release payment. So I want to verify the definition of that claimant certification, because it might be, even if we're not using electronic fund transfer, we may do claimant certification.
Okay, so if that's the case, thanks, Megan.
Yeah.
If that's the case, then we would definitely want to add it. So just let us know basically, and it can get added for first read with the rest for the November meeting if needed.
I will.
All right, next one is PNR 7440, which is school district security, which was revised. It was updated due to statutory changes requiring school districts to annually conduct a school safety audit for each school building in the district. The audit must be submitted to the New Jersey Office of Homeland Security and Preparedness and then the NJDOE. I didn't see any new optional language in this one either.
Correct.
Okay. Next up is P7450, which is property inventory, which is revised. I was updated to reflect definitions more accurately and include a chart of accounts used to make distinctions when recording property recording property inventory. And I didn't see any new optional language in this one either.
Correct.
Kevin, my only question on that one is it did say school board administrator / board secretary or designee several times. I'm assuming that they were allowing it to be either. Occasionally when it says or designee, we've identified. My question to Sean and Patty, are you guys comfortable with that? And just making sure the superintendent identifies it as school administrator / board secretary.
I'm sorry.
Megan, you're asking to remove the.
No,
Or designee?
it says school board administrator / board secretary or designee. A lot of times when it says or designee, it's been pick somebody and put it in the policy. I just want to make sure that
Right.
you guys are okay with knowing that you guys would have to identify specifically which one it would be, or if you guys would like to make it specifically school
I would
board
make it-
administrator / board secretary.
Either get rid of designee or define who the designee would be.
Yeah, I wasn't sure what you guys would be most comfortable with.
I don't see why there needs to be a designee.
I'm with you.
It should just really be, I mean, I guess a lot of places may have assistant school board secretaries or assistant business administrators. Maybe some larger districts do, but at our level, I wouldn't suggest that there be anybody else.
And the way it's worded right now is it took out the line to add the designee in there. So the language that they have in there is required is school business administrator, board secretary, or designee. So we would be deviating if we took out the or designee too.
Okay.
So we would have to make it clear on some sort of document that we are identifying. And I think that was my question, was really, do we
it
take
looks
the
like
policy or do they need to codify that the answer is it is the school board school business administrator / board secretary.
Yeah, because they took out in the policy to specify. So that's the language, the generic language they added in was the school board administrator, secretary, or designate.
Yeah, I think that's the language they want to have used.
Yep.
So you just have to codify somewhere in an email or on a document somewhere that you guys are choosing it to be Patty and not a designee. Another alternative designee.
No problem.
Okay, next is 7510, which is use of school facilities, also revised. It was updated to comply with regulatory changes requiring school districts provide information and training on the district's practices and procedures on school safety and security to persons who supervise youth programs not sponsored by the district but using district buildings. before or after hours. So basically it's the responsibility of the sponsor organization to train the program's employees and volunteers once they're provided that information. And it does require a statement of assurance be submitted by each organization to the district. So that's something, once we can start using our buildings again, that's something that we'll need to make sure that that statement of assurance is prepared, and then the required materials are provided to the youth programs to make sure that they can train their staff effectively.
And we have YMCA right now, so we'll make sure that I'll make sure that that's already been done previously with YMCA. Yeah.
Perfect. And I didn't see any new optional language there. Next up was 8420 emergency and crisis situations, which was revised. It updated statute require. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm
Dan.
sorry. I was on mute and I was thinking about something here. With the previous one, can we go back to that real quick?
Yep.
7510 use of school facilities. Are we at a point yet where we can consider opening up the gym in the evening?
No, we have not made any changes to anything we're doing to allow any outside organizations to use our building.
Okay.
And even talking to other districts, Dan, the steps that they would say is that the next step would be to use outside the building, but allow no access to inside. I know that's something that some districts had said that they were looking to do in the fall, but they were looking to not have anybody use the internal structures of the buildings throughout the winter months.
Yeah, there are a few programs in the area that do support indoor use. I'm seeing it primarily for sports related things.
Sure.
But yeah, it's just, I know we got a lot of other fish to fry, but that just seems like something we might consider at some point.
Okay. Next one was 8420 emergency crisis situation. So that one I didn't see any new additional optional language for. And then the one after that was 8561, which is procurement procedure for school nutrition programs. Does this apply to us, Patty?
Yes.
Because it's revised, but I don't see it on our books currently.
No, but what I can do is I can reach out, but in my previous districts, and they were all K-8s, we've had this on.
Okay, so then we'd need to add it on for first read, and
Yeah.
it's not currently on our books, Sean, just so you have that, or at least I didn't see it.
I don't believe
No,
it is.
it's not. I looked for it and it
Okay.
wasn't. And there were two optional things and I did fix those. They were very small. One was the type of building. We had an individual building, and the other was how many days in between, if there's a question when we go for RFP, and I put 5 days down there, which is a pretty standard number.
Okay. All right, that leaves then the last three are the restart and recovery policy guides. 1648, we have the policy in place currently. There are some mandatory updates. I didn't see any new optional actions for this policy.
Give me 1 second. My notes. Yes, this one was the one that there's no updates, just to reflect some changes that were made, especially in terms of social distancing or mask wearing, rather.
Yep. And it was all mandatory. The next one's the one that we have to make or you have to make recommendations on, we have to make decisions on. It's 1648.02. So this is remote learning options for families. This is a new mandatory policy. So we have to specify when a student may begin full-time remote learning, and then we also have to specify when a student may transition from remote to in-person. And the options are beginning the school year, beginning the marking period, beginning of the mid-year semester, or within X school days after receiving written approval from the principal or designee. And this applies basically going either way. So my question, Sean, is what's your recommendation before we really get into it?
First, when it comes to having a student switch to remote, that is not as much of a time delay as it would be for having a student return, which we actually do have in our recovery plan, just not outlined in the policy that it goes this way. So my feeling is to have a student return to remote or move to remote. I think that is something that can be done within I'd say 3 to 5 day period. If the board would agree, is that I think we've been very flexible on that one, especially the only thing just to note, and this is a little bit not full-time remote, but we've had those instances where people have to quarantine and they're put on temporary remote. So I just want to make sure I'm being clear to everyone that a temporary remote situation is not what this policy is addressing. This would be a full-time change in a student's learning environment from hybrid to remote.
And I get mechanistically that they're different, that they could be done different timeframes, but are we going to run into issues with families, or as Megan said at the last board meeting, with concerns of people saying, well, it's not fair if you're allowing X number of days one way, but not the same amount the other day. Should it be consistent between the two is really my question.
You're saying because it's a full-time situation change.
Mm-hmm.
We can also make it the same. I know, like, and our big issue with having the kids move from remote to hybrid is making sure that spacing set up, the transportation set up, all those little wrinkles. The remote, there are wrinkles because there's a change in how the teachers are structuring their lessons and all that. So that's why I said I would like to have a few days. I would say at the very least a 5-day window.
So then what's your recommendation for the other direction?
The other direction right now, we've been telling the families they have to give us at least a week's notice, but they can't come back. There's the set designated return dates, the first and third of each month, first and third Monday or Tuesday, depending on the cohort you have of each month is the date of return.
So right now that would be within probably, I guess, 15 days of school, or 15 school days, or after receiving approval. How would you, if we were to shoehorn it into the current policy?
The written request should be provided to principal at least blank. You're looking at number 1, Kevin?
Hold on. So there's two different things. One is how far the written request shall be provided. And then the second part is when they need to begin full-time remote learning and then full-time in-person learning, or in-person learning.
So that's what I'm saying. So the transition to that, if it's a full schedule change, I think a 3 to 5 day window is acceptable for this, because there's not as much of the physical requirements that are needed. But if you'd like, for consistency's sake, if that's what the board prefer, that's fine. I'm just saying it is easier to have a student move to remote.
Just out of curiosity, my interpretation of reading it, so Sean and Kevin, yours as well, and everyone else, is that there are so many calendar days, submit at least so many calendar days before eligible, and then there'll be within so many sorry, one of the options was within so many school days after receiving the written approval. So if we're saying to Sean, like, hey, they have to give it to you 14 calendar days, like 2 weeks ahead of time, and then they come in, or 10 like those, how do those things overlap? Does Sean just provide written approval twice? If we were to continue with the current model, just written approval comes out twice a month, 2 days or 3 days or 4 days school days ahead, like is your written approval by this have to be immediate? I think
you know what, I think it's a good point, Megan. The way I'm looking at it here is we can make it however many days we want to provide for them to request it. That's really whatever Sean wants it to be. But then whatever that is, they don't come back or they don't leave until it's in accordance with the second part of it, which is separate.
Right. So I think the question becomes how much lead time, and then to that point, as a board, which of those options do you want? Because if it's based off written approval, that would allow Sean to pick, let's say it was the same ones we're currently using, or once a month, or whatever the board and administration, agrees to. So I think that maybe there's a little bit more wiggle room here in the languaging.
There's no way to separate the coming back and the leaving, because to me, as Sean said, it's so much easier for a student to go from hybrid to remote.
No, Vicky, they're separate. If you look at it, Vicky, they are separated. It's two separate different sections of the policy. So my question to Sean, though, was, are there going to be concerns about being unfairly targeting certain children if one's one way and one's the other way?
So I think the way that the kind of combat that, Kevin, is under number 4 later on, where it says that how many days each child must be in remote learning before they're eligible to come back. Do you know what I'm saying? So I think that's the ping pong as well, because I think that's really what can create is you don't want the parent, you don't want to create the situation. If you remember, that's what we talked about from the beginning about not having the ping ponging. Hey, I'm going to go remote for this week. Is that okay? I'm giving you a heads up. I'll be right back. And I think that is more of the thing that we want to make sure that it's not, that option is not becoming open.
And to be honest, our families who have kids that are at the high school have that option right now. So I think it's very clear, necessary for us to delineate it.
Because I know
So really then, Sean, the question is how many calendar days before the student's eligible to commence the switch do you want notification? That's the first question. So do you think 3 to 5 days is sufficient, or 5 days?
I think, like, why don't you say 5? I think 5's clean.
Okay. And then the bigger question is when they can begin, and this one's for remote. So when they can come back, or when they can begin full-time remote learning after that notification. So do you want it at the beginning of the year? Obviously, we aren't doing that at the beginning of marking period, mid-year semester, or within how many days after receiving that written approval?
Again, I think it comes down to within days of receiving written approval.
So then within 15 days to be safe, or?
Well, again, this is just a child going from remote to remote learning after I write to them. So if I get that request in 5 days, I'm going to tell them you're going to be able to begin within, by the time I'm going to reply to them and say, you have the ability to start on such and such a date. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. But do you want to say the next day, or do you want to give yourself a little bit of wiggle room in case mechanistically you need to have some space, is kind of what I'm getting at.
So because we can use, because I'm saying the operative phrase in this policy is within. So it can be
Exactly.
sooner, but not more than. So I think, in my opinion, again, I think the 5-day window is totally fine because it gives us that framework to work with.
Okay.
More often than not, it will not take that length of time. I want to make sure that's understood, but it at least gives us that operative.
And then I think the other area that we have to talk about is you have to specify how many days you have to provide that written approval. It's under B6 or 3.6.
Yes. I think 3 days.
Well, that's calendar days. So I just want to put that in there because that might
Everything
make
else
things
is
a little bit
schools.
tricky.
Yeah.
Yeah. And especially when we're coming up to holidays. So I think that has to be taken into account. I don't want someone to send it on the December 23rd.
Why don't we say that then again, the 5 days, we're being consistent on the other numbers we've been using.
So 5 calendar days, or do you want to do 7 calendar days so it's one complete week of school? You see what I?
7 calendar versus school.
Just to mess with you a little bit.
Yes. Always like when they do that.
So then the next one is the reverse. So this is going from full-time remote to in-person. Mm-hmm. So how much notification, the request must be submitted how many days before the student is eligible is the first question.
So this goes back to, again, where it's a little bit different what we're currently doing, because we're saying it's the first and third Monday of a month, which does not fit within the framework they're using. In our current guidance that we're saying is you have to, it's a 1 week, you have to know a full calendar week before the first or third Monday of a month of your entry points. So I don't know if it will be acceptable to change the wording from the recommended to our actual usage.
I mean, if you wanted to match your current usage, you could put within 15 school days, right?
Perfect.
Because that should cover you. I mean, if you,
what's calendar?
Well, your approval. So again, 2 things here. You're talking how long it takes for your approval, them to submit the request, and then separately how long to come back. So submitting the request is different. So
I understand.
How far in advance do you want them to submit the request?
Calendar days. This is all calendar.
So again, I think the submitting the request for calendar days, we've been saying it has to be at least 1 week calendar wise before then. So I think it goes down to at least 7 days, 7 calendar days.
Okay. And then the second part would be within 15 school days, right? Or you could say 20 if you want to be safe.
Sure.
I mean,
Why
you have
not?
you have leeway there because it's within, so. And then how often they must, the last part is how often they must remain in remote learning prior to returning to in-person.
And I think that's where we have to be clear on that one to prevent the ping ponging.
What's in the restart or what's in our plan right now?
Right now, we just have said that it's up to my discretion. There's nothing that's clearly defined in there. But I think that's why they have this policy, because districts were kind of saying it's up to the superintendent's discretion. They wanted something properly outlined in policy.
Okay. So what's your recommendation then is?
My feeling is it should be at least a month, so to speak, of school that you're staying out for an entire, which roughly, if you're looking at it, would probably, let's call it 20 school days. Right, most months, I would say, would be 20.
I mean, that should prevent ping pong theoretically, and it's a month. And then to go back to the very first one, as Megan so kindly pointed out, that was calendar days too. So your very first 5 should probably be a 7 too.
Absolutely, good catch. Thank you.
Anybody else on that one? Okay. The last one is 1648.03, which is full-time remote instruction. It includes requirements for remote instruction. I didn't see anything optional in the policy.
There is nothing optional for that policy.
So then if you could have, as you guys get through these, have them posted on the website, and then any that need follow-up, if you could have those followed up on, and then we can hopefully have them for first read at the November meeting.
Absolutely. We'll get working on them and see. Hopefully we'll get most, if not all of them for that point. How's that, Kevin? A lot of policies.
As best you can.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Hold on, my pen just died. November meeting. Okay. Do we have anything under unfinished business?
I just wanted to thank Sean. I know he's still looking at Junior National Honor Society and Olson Academic Leaders. So he sent me an update. He's still meeting with some of the stakeholders on that. So thank you for those meetings, Sean.
Very welcome.
Sean, did you work on a return plan?
I think that's kind of what we were talking about for the most part with the ed tech grouping, Meg, or is there something different you were looking?
No, if Murphy says tomorrow, okay, everybody go back to school, that plan, that return plan, you know, the one of 15.
The one of 15, yeah, that's one of the conversations. Again, that's just a modification, pretty much the existing schedule. The biggest part of that would be, stretching what we currently have out into a longer model. Because again, don't forget what we're currently really is a half-day version of a full-day schedule.
Right.
Obviously, the biggest part of the transition will be to make sure that we're rearranging classrooms for furniture, for spacing, for things like that. But the biggest thing to think about and to gain knowledge based on what Murphy would say would be how you'd be handling the remote learning. Because it's our understanding right now, there has not been a cap set, even look at the policy that's reviewed in terms of the length of time students would be able to operate into a remote setting. So that becomes the next question as to what happens with those students who have opted to remote by the DOE's guidance. Does that mean that those students are considered for home instruction students, or those students considered remote learners? And how is the district directed to meet their needs? That is the biggest quandary that would happen with a case like that.
So you're saying that if Murphy said tomorrow, everybody go back to school, we would still have virtual learners?
To my understanding so far, there has been nothing from the DOE that would say that remote learning options would be taken away from parents right now. So again, there has not been a formal declaration or any sort of changes or even inclination of changes coming from the DOE to the existing plans that were rolled out this summer beyond the modifications they've released sporadically to the FAQ documents on their website, which happens every now and then. So, but if they did make some other formal declaration, I have not heard anything that would say they would take away the remote learning option from families.
So if we are told that we not only can, but should and will go back to full-time in person, how do we do that and also still have
Supportive
supports for
remote-
those
yeah.
that want to stay remote?
Exactly. And that comes down to, like I said, we'd have to get more guidance if the recommendation then was to meet those needs via home instruction or what they're, or because again, don't forget, in a usual environment and schools are open in normal sessions, there are circumstances where students are, to use the today's word terminology of remote learners, but realistically they're on home instruction for issues, and it usually requires a doctor's notification to put a student out on home instruction. So that is the default setting for those types of things. So if they went back to, let's call it business as usual, right? Then it would be the understanding is, are they going to require people not an opt into the situation based on right now, there is no reasoning that has to be given by any person to have their child be in remote learning. But if it was all remote or full switch back to a traditional setting, then the traditional setting would require an actual reasoning behind that remote or home instruction. So again, like I said, that's a big clarification point that would have to be given from the DOE if they went back from what we currently have to an opening as per usual.
And currently our home instruction is done by.
Right now,
specific
home instruction
teachers.
is not needed right now because of
Well,
remote.
I know, but I'm talking, 9 months ago.
Oh, I'm sorry, Meg. Yes, then that would be
9 months ago, our the way our home instruction operated was a child had a reason to be home, and
Correct.
a teacher would visit them at the house, right? Correct?
Correct. That is correct.
If 50 kids opt to not come back, how do we handle that?
Well, again, like I said, that comes down to realistically, if it would be a situation where it would go back to the old ways of to have a home instruction situation. Traditionally, it's a doctor's note, it's a medical reason. Our school physician has to vet, has the ability to vet the cases for the request as well, and we have to meet those needs for the designated amount of time. That's if it went back to that existing way and not the remote learning we have right now. So again, like I said, that's something that has not been, I have not heard any conversation about that, nor realistically in any of the conversations that anybody said to expect anything in the coming months of a full remote to return in that way. So I would expect if something was to come that way, that we would get some additional guidance points in terms of trying to work it in more of a remote setting, the way we kind of currently are right now, as opposed to which home instruction that was done in the past. Because obviously, you hit the nail on the head. If you think about the large cost to a district, or, again, we're a small district, you think about some larger districts, the number of students that are opting for remote, when you extrapolate the numbers out there, therefore the cost, if you're talking 10 hours a week, for some kids, or 5 hours a week for others, whatever the case may be, can really add up very fast.
So I hate to put a wrinkle in this. Say the governor says in 2 weeks we all go back. Do you have the bus routes planned?
Yes.
For 5 days a week, everybody comes back?
All bus routes are planned. Everything's already done. Our biggest issue will be changing our classroom configurations to enable more students to be in there, lengthening our schedule to go from what we currently have with the half-day schedule to make it the full-day schedule. Again, and to make sure our cafeteria, if we had to run the full day, we'd have to make some adjustments in our cafeteria, adjusting staff scheduling to meet some other additional needs in terms of just adjusting some support staff for IEP needs and things along those lines. But again, there has been no indication from any source in the DOE that something like this would be happening. That being said, we have had conversations to figure out what time frame it would take us, because again, one of the biggest issues, if it happened, like I said, is rearranging the classrooms, making sure the desks that we currently have in storage we could bring back, repopulate the classrooms, rearrange everything that way. So we would look at it, that's not an overnight or even a weekend job. You're talking a lot of furniture that would be around. So it would have to happen over some time, either of let's call it moving the district for a temporary period of remote learning for a course of, let's call it a week, to do that, or doing something like capitalizing on a winter break, spring break, things like that. It would have to be a building unoccupied to make sure it's properly done and make sure everything's rearranged.
Okay, that's all I've asked. This is the third meeting. We've got to be sure we've got a plan.
We do.
Because at this rate, it's a coin flip what's going to happen tomorrow.
I think the number of plans we have grows by every day that passes. How's that?
Like every household is doing also.
Okay, anybody with any other unfinished business?
I have one other item. I don't actually recall if this is unfinished or new. I know it was discussed. I don't remember the format.
Go
So
ahead.
with that, I'll proceed. So, Sean, we spoke before about the daily health screening forms. I'm wondering if you've had opportunity to clarify from any of the other surrounding districts more details about how they're managing that.
I have not, since our last conversation, had any other time with the other districts to talk any changes. They have had no changes since the last time I updated you, from my understanding. However, as a district, we have made changes to make sure that the health screenings are done properly and with validity, including making sure we have a staff assigned to call families now that if they are not doing it properly. We've juggled our times to put set limitations on timeframes of when the daily screening should be done, how it should be done in a timely manner, and to make sure our logs are properly updated and maintained as well.
Okay, good to hear all of that. That's actually more than I was looking for at the moment. But what I really was trying to get at is there are some districts that are not requiring a daily check-in. And I wanted to figure out how they're able to do that and what we need to do that here.
I know, as we've talked about this before, I'm incredibly hesitant to pull away. I can tell you that the number of times we've had parents who call us and said, because I did that daily screening this morning, I realized my child failed the daily screening. What are my next steps? It's keeping that forefront in there, and it's keeping people to keep kids home that otherwise might not think about it. So I know it's inconvenience to some, but I think it's protecting all.
If the family has reached out to you because they feel they have failed the daily screening, are you then requiring a COVID test?
No, we require a conversation. And quite often we are not the ones necessarily to fully recommend a COVID test. It's usually a recommendation to, then talk to your physician, make sure you're going through them. This is the steps that may happen. If your child quarantines, here's what we have to do. It opens those avenues, the conversation to support the families.
Okay.
Any other unfinished business?
Yeah, Meg and I had talked earlier. I woke up in the middle of the night and started thinking about our budget cuts. Where did we end up this year with that? And are we hearing anything about the upcoming year?
Yeah, the state aid.
I'm not sure what you mean by where we ended up this year.
Well, because they always give us a projected amount and then it always comes in way
And
higher.
then they change it by like $100,000.
So
Right.
this year they haven't adjusted the funds that we're getting this year are still the same. I just got an updated state aid form yesterday, or the 31st, sorry, and the number is the same as it's been consecutively. Looking at the history, I haven't had a chance to really do a lot of deep diving, but it looked like we were scheduled to lose around 500 or a little bit more than 500,000 in the 21-22 year. Not a peep. There hasn't been a peep. There hasn't been anything from the state at all to discuss what's going to happen with state aid.
So we lost the 600 this year, and you're saying next year, the 2021 year, is looking like we're still holding at losing another 500,000.
That was the estimate.
Right.
So I've not heard anything different.
All right. Usually they give us an estimate, and then when they finally go through with it, they jack the estimate up. So, so this year the estimate was actually the actual?
As far as it is today, I don't know what's going to happen in 2 months, but today Nothing has changed.
Now, Meg, it wasn't, we originally were supposed to lose like something like 512, and it jumped up to 609 when they gave the final numbers, and then they didn't change it after everything happened. So it
Okay.
stayed at 609.
Gotcha. Okay. Anybody else with unfinished business? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to new business. Seeing none, move on to miscellaneous.
I
I
have
have something.
something.
Vicky, go ahead.
Wait a minute. Who is who?
That's okay. Thank you, Kevin. Age before beauty, you know. I had talked to Sean about this, and I don't know, with everything else that's going on, this doesn't seem like a big issue, but it bothers me a little bit. We have young children that are in school that don't have the availability of a snack. And I know the idea with removing the mask, but I sent Sean an email with a suggestion, because some of these children don't eat a big breakfast. Some of them are not breakfast eaters, and they're away from home for a good 5 hours by the time they get on the bus and they get here. And then by the time they get off the bus, I was mentioning to Sean that possibly a finger snack, if they're allowed to pull their mask down to take a sip of water, they should be allowed to pull their mask down to pop a little fish cracker or a mini cookie or something in their mouth. Not taking the mask off, but being able to eat finger type foods. And that was just something that I had asked Sean to check into if he could.
I did, Vicky. And it's just, we do have snacks available during days where it is nice weather.
Yeah, but
or it's not raining right now.
how many more nice weather days are we going to have? That's the
That
whole
being
thing.
said, we did reach into other districts to find out what you're doing, some different practices. Some districts went so far as to buying plexiglass or vinyl coated trifolds for desks, doing different things that way. I was trying to look into how we can do this in the safest way possible without a large expense to the district. Because again, those trifolds just, are run like, 170 on up for each trifold.
Right.
So, well, we actually had met with Casey, and I met with Casey, I met with Rich, we talked to our nurses. I actually talked to our school physician as well to get some input on some different ideas to make sure we're doing things in the safest way possible. So it was at TES, becomes actually easier to do that because we have the APR is used at times for phys ed, but not all the time. So we could actually have the windows of the APR opened. That way it's getting better circulation in there. Again, we're looking for it to go more than is required because technically it would meet the needs. If we'd open the windows, we could then develop a schedule for each class to go sit in there. We talked about marking out 6-foot spacing around the half of the APR that is not being used currently for phys ed, because we really have only half of it really being used. The other half we had as table locations if needed. We then could also put the hydroxyl generator in there every single night. That way it would get a clean, fresh scrubbing of the room, again, overabundance necessary. So that could knock out TES. For OMS, it's kind of a little bit trickier. One, obviously, as we talked about before, the APR is being used as a phys ed location. So because of the amount of times that it's being used, I was very hesitant in talking to the nurses and talking to our school physician of having students use that area to eat a snack at the same time other students are in there wearing masks, doing physical exerting activities. So we came up with a safer plan, which would be twofold. For rooms that have windows that are on the exterior of the rooms, the buildings, they would basically the protocol would be for the rooms, the windows to be opened. Okay. The students would take out the snack. They open the snack. Once the snack is opened, they pull the mask down. They eat the snack. Then once they're done eating the snack, they put the mask back on. And only at that point in time, once all masks are put back on, would the windows then be eligible to be closed. Again, the only thing we're looking there, the window, there is plenty of circulation in the rooms themselves. This is, again, looking to say, what can we do more than to make this the safest manner possible if we decide to do this? For the rooms without windows, we actually are in the process, and tomorrow, because our building is not being used for in-person instruction as per the governor's mandate of no in-person instruction in the state for election day, are working to reconfigure half of our den, which would turn half of our den into it's called a snack area, so to speak, of individualized desks for students that we did measure out to figure out how many could fit in there. Again, because it is a more cavernous space, more open than an individual classroom, we thought it was a safer area for students to have the masks off if they did need to. We also are using our dens currently for certain students who have medical needs to eat snack in there instead of eating in their classrooms. They're being washed there to begin with. So the same thing, they could go into that room once they're seated, they could take their snacks out. Again, once the snack is out, once the snack is open, you would take your mask off and, put it away, then wipe down those desks and return to the room. And again, we would have a schedule created that location would only be used in the case of inclement weather. But we figured if we did it that way, that's probably the safest way possible, and also limiting the amount of time. I know some districts also talked about trying to keep the kids in the room and doing what they're calling a working snack. I am incredibly against that idea, for the simple fact that quite often when they're working, that's working with Chromebooks. So the last thing we want is to have a student who's working and spill their drink, eat their crumbs, whatever the case it may be, and therefore damage one of our devices. So we thought this was a way to handle it. Also, don't forget, because of our K-5 students, they don't move out of their classrooms at all during the day. So right now, when they go, except right now, if they're going to phys ed, or if they're going outside for their stretch their legs to read outside, or for their snack time, as it might be on nice weather. So this also gives them an opportunity to stretch their legs, to move to a different location, even for a brief minute of time, to eat in the den before they return back to their classrooms.
All right, thank you, Sean. I appreciate that.
No problem.
I do feel like we're overcomplicating this. They are social distancing, and most of the kids have all had us as parents reminding them about don't touch each other, don't grab each other's stuff. I mean, I think they could manage snack.
It's protecting not just the students, it's also protecting the staff. And I think from talking to our school nurse, and not just nurse, I'm sorry, our school physician, we're trying to figure out the best thing we can do to make sure that our buildings don't become a spreading site. So although it might be overcomplicating things, at least it puts everyone at ease that we are taking more than the necessary steps to make sure we're doing something like this in the safest way possible. And like I said, it all does give the added benefit right now that when we have the nice weather, when they're going out for snack time, it is stretching their legs. It is giving them a brief moment of respite from the classroom they're currently in, and that change of location, I do think, is a positive thing for the students as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've been around the school and I've seen the kids coming out on either side of the building playing and look like they're enjoying it. So until the weather gets yucky, of course.
Absolutely. We do want to continue that as much as possible because, again, I do think having the fresh air, having those moments where they're able to take their masks off outside, I think is a positive for the students.
Open windows is going to be a problem now when it's 20 degrees outside.
Again, that's why we're looking at a very brief moment, Gail. There still is the heat in the room. We're not looking at having this be a very short, we want this to be a short snack. This is not a 30-minute, let's sit in there and eat as much as this is a, let's quickly go this, eat your snack, do this very quickly and clean up and go. Again, because we want to try to prioritize our time in terms of the academics as well, but trying to also meet the needs. To Vicky's point that some of these students, may not have eaten breakfast, and try to keep them going in some way too. We also have talked to other families that have had that concern of different issues. And one of our recommendations and modifications has been with a number of people is that you can also bring in a protein shake. Therefore, you can actually, the protein shake and a straw can actually keep your mask on and still get sustenance that way. So I know we have a number of people that have taken us up on that suggestion too.
Kevin, did you have something?
Yeah, I just had something that's completely unrelated. I had the opportunity to participate in a webinar this week from the Partnership for a Drug-Free New Jersey. It's called the Knockout Opioid Abuse Town Hall Series. And I wanted to recommend them for anybody, any parents, any staff, anyone in the district that wants to learn a little bit more about opioid abuse and opioid use. They have some really, really interesting speakers. This week, they actually talked about a new program that's coming to school districts in the state, which is called Handle with Care program. It's used in Ocean County right now, but it's going to be rolling out, I think, by the end of the year to a lot of other districts in the state, really throughout the whole state, where if a child experiences some type of traumatic event outside of school, they notify the school district that that child is at risk, and they just need to be handled with care basically for that, to make sure that if they did have some type of traumatic event, the staff is aware to make sure that that child's not, they aren't unduly stressed during the school day. And they said that law enforcement officers are going to be trained through in November, I believe, of this year, and then it'll probably be rolling out statewide. So just something to keep your eyes out for, Sean. But it was a really, really interesting presentation, and I thought it would be useful for a lot of people in the district too.
Thank you for sharing, Kevin.
Thank you. Anything else under miscellaneous? You ready to go?
Yeah, well, we'll take just a quick time to remind all families, again, if you are vacationing this week, to please let us know, because as we talked to a number of people that are, it does require a quarantine if you go to any of the states that are recommended in the ever-growing list of quarantine locations. And again, that is something that, you know, we work out with those families. So please don't think it's something you have to hide. It's something that we work with your child to make sure that education is maintained throughout their quarantine. So if this is something that's going on, just let us know.
Sean, is that going to be communicated more widely to the parents of the district?
We will put another reminder out. I know we've talked to a number of people, but we'll have another reminder go out.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Definitely a good message to convey.
Okay, can I get a motion for adjournment?
I'll take it.
Second, Vicky.
All right, we're putting Gail and Vicky. All
Okay.
in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All in favor, good. All opposed? You guys had me nervous there. All abstain. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Bye.